Today's episode, we're making Busy Reading Romantasy history, and I actually have an author back to discuss, spoilers included, her second book. I'm talking about Bethanie Finger. We're talking about More Than Legend today. I highly recommend you check out our episode where we talked about her first book, More Than Life. Obviously, it just makes sense to do that first, then come over here. We talk about a more obscure trope that is quickly becoming one of my favorites, as well as mountain whales and Sidons and all these other creatures. And it is like, buckle up, because she packs a lot into a story, and it deals some damage. Welcome to Busy Reading Romantasy, a video podcast that discusses books that merge elements of romance and fantasy while occasionally exploring other genres. We get to escape our world and dive deep into themes of good versus evil, power dynamics, and all of the delicious taboo topics. Curiosity and open-mindedness are a must. That being said, this is a podcast for mature audiences only and will contain spoilers. Your mental health matters, so be sure to check the trigger warnings of each book to decide if this is the right episode for you to listen to. Now, let's get into today's episode. Yeah, actually, I think you are also my first author that I have back to talk about a book to.
Ooh.
I had Hillary Raymer. She teased the book too, but I hadn't read it yet, so we didn't have the in-depth conversation. So thank you for being my first.
Very excited.
How has life been?
Life is good. How are you?
Good. It's like we were just talking about before we started recording. It's been a Monday. My dogs decided they wanted to play tag with one of my chickens.
Oh, chickens?
I do. And that was a point of pride of mine that I was like, no, the dogs and the chickens all get along. Well, one of the chickens started to run from the dogs, and the dogs are like, ooh, we like this game.
Yeah.
And it's just gotten worse. So now they're no longer allowed to be together, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So, luckily everything's okay. Also had to call a plumber because homeowner issues and just a lot, but I'm happy to be here and excited to talk about this.
Take a break from the drama in your house to talk about the drama that I put Jazz through.
I know, but I loved it. Yeah. I loved it.
Good.
Every minute of it. Yeah, so
there's a lot of people that have not forgiven me for Jazz, so I'm glad that you loved it.
No, okay, so actually
my mother threatened to disown me.
No, I'm really excited to talk about why I love it so much, and I think it's my new favorite. Not my favorite trope, but it's quickly becoming a trope that I love because this is my second book that I've read about it, but we'll get into all of that. But I guess before we hopped into that, I just wanted to kind of check in and see have you been doing any writing? I know you have a full-time job, but on the authoring aspect, do you have any updates for us in the last few months?
Yes, a lot of things are changing. I actually soon won't have a full-time job. I told my principal that I'm going to focus on authorship. So next year I won't be teaching. I'll just be trying to write books and get people to read them.
Awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah. And then I have More Than Dreams and More Than Destiny are with the editors. So hopefully they'll be coming out in the next couple of months. And I have a back burner book that my publisher is interested in. And for fans of mine, I talked about it on my podcast a lot. It's called Vanity. And it's a 3-part series, Vanity, Clarity, and Serenity. And a lot of my listeners will be excited because they've asked me a million times, hey, More Than Life is done. Are we getting Vanity now? Or Vanity was shelved. It almost got published. And then it was shelved when I lost my dad. And then when it was time to get back to writing, I wanted More Than Life. So Vanity has been sitting on the shelf for about 4 years now, but it might be coming next.
Awesome. That's really exciting. and quite a big shift too as well. Like, have you thought about kind of your transition? I know it's exciting when you have like more time, but also there's this aspect of like, as someone who works from home and knows what it's like working from
Mhm.
home, and it's like I
It's
actively have to
scary.
like leave the house and interact with other people, because otherwise I'm like in the black hole of my home for a while.
I'm very lucky. So most of my friends are internet friends
Yeah.
just because we move around so much. And
Yeah.
then Quentin, my husband and I, we were best friends for like 5 years before we got together or started dating. So even when I'm not working, I'm hanging out with him.
Yeah.
I'll leave the house like once or twice a week to like go writing with some writer friends of mine, and
Yeah.
I'll go visit my sisters and my mom sometimes because they're about 2 hours away. But I love being at home.
Yeah.
If I had it my way, I probably would not leave very often. Especially right now. Right now it's bee season, and
Mhm.
I love bees. I love bees. I think
Yeah.
they're so for me, they're like such a source of happiness and good luck. And we have all these flowers in the yard. So right now I just want to be outside all day staring at the bees inside the flowers and just like watching them float around. And
Yeah.
it's very common in my culture that if a bee touches you, it's good luck.
I
And
love
I've
that.
never been stung by a bee. I've
Yeah.
had lots of good luck. Like anytime I'm around a bee, I usually get like at least one of them in my hair, on my shoulder or something. So
Yeah.
I'm just outside, like standing under the flower tree, just hoping one of them will drop down and say hi and I can get some good
Yeah.
luck.
I love that. So
Mhm.
I had a moment with the bees up in Alaska where like my dad was busy doing stuff and I was just like, I had nothing to do and we were camping, and it turned into an hour of me just watching bees, and I like fell
Mm,
in love. I fell in love, and
I
now
love
I,
it.
I notice them and I consider us good friends. So I love that. And good to know that they're good luck.
It's
That's
actually
awesome.
it's my nickname. My family has called me Bee ever since I can
Yeah.
remember. And according to my mom, when I was a kid, bees were just always around me. If it was
Oh,
like the summer, or the spring, or the fall when bees are like most active, they were just
yeah.
always in my vicinity. And I've
Yeah.
never been stung before, and I've had plenty that have, they get in my hair, they get on my clothes. I like to wear a lot of floral print,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that kind of attracts them naturally. And yeah, it's really happy season for me right now because I go outside and I
Yay.
hear them buzzing around and
Yeah.
pollinating the earth so we can continue to live on it, which is nice.
Very important. Yeah. Yeah. I
Mhm.
love that. That's such a good energy. Now, unfortunately, now it's like way too hot here in Florida. But
Mm,
in like February, when it's cool enough still, we'll always leave our doors. I leave the back doors open, and a bee always inevitably comes in at some point. So I get
I
to play
love it.
savior and help them back out. But
Yeah, if
um,
anybody's listening and you don't know how to get a bee out of your house, turn off all the lights and open a door, and they will follow the light right outside.
oh, interesting. I I think I'd take a slightly more hands-on approach, but also I think I've been around bees enough that I'm not. I also, I think once you remove that fear piece and you can be very calm around them, I do
Mhm.
think they respond very well to that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll have to talk bees more. I mean, we could talk about them all day. Um, how's the podcast going? What's the name of it too? Oh,
Good.
got excited.
So I
Um,
have I have 4 podcasts. So I have Prince Kai Fan Pod, which just celebrated 6 years, which is all about
okay.
all of the books by Marissa Meyer. We're finishing Lunar Chronicles right now. We're going to start Heartless soon, which I'm excited about. I
Mhm.
have another podcast called Tangled Up, which is all about Rapunzel because Rapunzel is amazing. I have a vampire literature podcast called Bite Me that premieres
Mhm.
next month.
Mhm.
And I have a Twilight podcast called This is the Podcast of a Killer, which is something I do with my sisters. And that premieres
Yeah.
in, I want to say September, was that
Okay.
supposed to premiere? Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember a little bit that we talked about it. But that's awesome. Very
Yeah. I
exciting.
mean,
Lots of
I
stuff.
have so many ideas in my head to do 9 million different podcasts. So it'll probably just keep growing into
Inevitably.
longer and longer lists.
Yes. There we go. Each time I have you back, we can go over the new the new
Just
podcast you've
what's
created.
new? What are you guys doing now?
You bring out your list. So number 19, we have.
What was the last thing I told you about?
Right. Right. No, that's great. So awesome. Well, as we've hinted at, and you should have gotten the memo as we've talked about this. Ideally, if you've clicked on this episode, you already know what you're getting into. But we're talking about book 2. So if you would like to start at the very beginning and you haven't, please check out our the first book. And do you want to give a quick little synopsis around book 1 and kind of getting us prepped for getting into book 2?
Yeah, like the giveaway and everything. So book 1 is spoilers. I'll say that right now. Book 1 is it follows Cordelia as she loses her dad and navigates a new life among the working class. And while there, she meets Jaspar, who is her dad's apprentice, but he suffers from a curse of anonymity. He's able to temporarily break his curse, but when it comes back, the world seems to forget about him, but Cordelia doesn't. And as they embark on a journey to defeat Janus, the evil sorcerer, and reclaim Quillars and break Jaspar's curse so he can be remembered, the ship that they are traveling on gets attacked by Sidons and it starts to sink. And that is the end of book 1. I think it says the ship is sinking beneath the waves of the Tylerian Sea and they are sinking with it.
Yeah. That
it's
was
brutal, guys.
Something about your books, and it's so funny because I don't know. Reading it on what is it, Kindle.
Mm-hmm.
The way it's set up is like you get to the end, like I keep reading and I keep swiping and then it'll pop it up to be like, rate this book, and I'm like, wait, what? Hang on. Okay.
You're like, I must have missed a page somewhere. That's the end. Yep, that's the end.
Go back. This is the second time that's gotten me.
Yeah. I just really want people to get to the next book.
You are exceptional at that, I will say.
Thank you.
So again, disclaimer, this is a podcast that is full of spoilers. We like to discuss the books in depth, and we don't want to have to tiptoe around what information we can and cannot say. So again, great place to pause if you're interested, read the book. You'll probably get through it pretty quick, just like me, and then you can come back and listen to this episode. So let's talk right off the bat, because we left on a cliffhanger, the start of book 2 and how
is a flashback.
Oh yeah, true. Starting very, very there.
It starts with a flashback. Yeah. Instead of going straight to what happened after the ship was sinking, we start with a flashback to when Jaspar discovered the captain's body.
Right, exactly. Oh, and that's how we know. Does it mention it there? I took very bad notes on this just because I was like, I want to read this. I wasn't stopping.
That is always a good reason to take bad notes.
But I think that's where we get the first little hint that he notices it and like he sees what happens and his memory gets erased. So he doesn't realize that he was there and saw that Captain Kimball had died. Why was it important to you to start right there?
I think because I really wanted to make sure that readers remembered the loss of book 1. Book 1 is essentially a journey through grief, and this is the person that we lost. And I didn't want readers to forget about the captain, because as Jaspar loses his memory, he has to go through that grief all over again. And I feel like it just wouldn't be very impactful if we had forgotten about the captain and become, solely focused on the mission instead. So it's also, there's a lot of foreshadowing there for book for the end of this book with Iverson, and then also for book 3. So, and a little bit for More Than Destiny, if anybody wants to read the spinoff.
Fair. Awesome.
I love my
Yeah.
foreshadowing, so I have to put it in there wherever I can.
Yeah. And that is a great point, that it does kind of reset the scene, and it is a very touching moment, and to also get it from Jaspar's point of view, and kind of I think it sets the scene, because we do go through like Jaspar essentially experiencing that all over again, you know.
And it's
um
hard.
yeah. So right past that, we get the continuation of where book 1 left off, and that was Cordelia is stuck in this cage trap. You know,
Yeah.
she's stuck in there. The ship is sinking. It's going underwater. Jaspar is trying to save her. And yeah, tell us a little bit more about how that all like transpires.
So at the end of the last book, we have a little bit of this scene because we have her, she becomes incapacitated. She gets hit by fallen debris from the ship attack. And when she wakes up, she's trapped in this cage, this crab catcher, and it's wedged into the corner of the ship, so she cannot get out. Jaspar is desperately trying to get her out. She wants him to, get out on his own and save himself, but obviously he can't do that. And luckily, Fran, or who we think is Fran, shows up and is able to help her channel her magic. But originally she was unable to because she was just so incredibly injured. Because girl has, fractured ribs and dislocated shoulder, a pretty severe concussion, and just wounds everywhere. But she's barely managing to hold her head up at all. And if it wasn't for Ron being there, she wouldn't be able to channel her magic in any way. And I don't remember at what point in this book it's revealed, but I think it's about halfway through the book that it's revealed it's not who rescued her, it's her mother's bird. So that was a nice little just tidbit to throw in there, is that her mom is kind of watching from afar.
Yeah.
Which we'll learn more about in More Than Dreams and More Than Destiny. So everybody wait for those when they come out and read them, because that's a foreshadow clue.
Yeah, that'll be exciting for sure. Yeah, and so essentially they all make it out. But we realize Jaspar has lost all of his memory. He has no idea who Cordelia is. He so much as
Now
like
I have to ask, did you see that coming at all? Because everyone I've spoken to thought it was going to be the opposite. They thought, okay, now we're going to get to book 2 and Cordelia is going to lose her memory of him. So were you able to predict this plot twist?
No, I wasn't. I was gobsmacked. I was flabbergasted. And then immediately I got really excited because there was, which one is it? Oh, I have to find where it's at. Oh, the Serpent and Dove series. There is, spoiler, so if you
because I haven't read that one, so tell me.
Oh,
no, it's okay.
I don't want to spoil. Okay.
But I'm just, I won't know the reference, so you'll have to explain it a little bit for me.
Perfect. So, no, basically, about halfway through, same curveball is that the male main character loses his memory, and just I love that, because there's something about just getting to fall in love again. Like, give me that same tension, and I feel like it's so sweet. So, while it is absolutely soul crushing, I also appreciate it so much, and like how beautiful that they get the chance to like just do that again. Not that it's fun for either of them at all, but as the reader, I get to enjoy
honestly,
it.
some of my best work is the two of them falling in love the second time around. And there's an exercise that authors such as myself use, which is when you feel the doubt of imposter syndrome, which is inevitable, you go back and read something that you're exceptionally proud of, and we're in the spoiler section now, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The You Loved Me chapter is my go-to for like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm actually a decent writer. I just need to channel this version of myself. That's a gut-wrenching scene, but I like to think it's very well written.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. We will yeah. I loved it all. And the more like yeah, it takes time and like I said it's a little frustrating, but
Mm-hmm.
so beautiful at the same time to watch them like continue to soften and to really see how Cordelia steps up and continues to be by
Yeah.
his side. And I really like how you included that with the loss of memory, especially around a traumatic event, like the physical symptoms of like having headaches and like obviously the confusion and just like the
Yeah.
sickness and stuff like that. And I thought that was such a great um, it feels weird to say that was such a great inclusion, but I think that was I know it feels weird to say, but I think it was great in the sense that she couldn't just be like, hey, here's everything that happened, right?
Yeah.
It was it for me it built the tension even more around like their whole the like need to know basis and
Mm-hmm.
what she was deciding what was need to know versus things he didn't need to know. Yeah, tell me more just about all of those pieces that play together.
So some of it was just me learning the concept of amnesia and what actually happens in real life.
Yeah.
And the whole amnesia thing started because I wrote chapter 3, and for some reason I ended that chapter on the phrase, "Who the blazes are you?" The only person that says blazes is Jazz, and Jazz knows all the people that were in the shipwreck with him. So why would he say that? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where I got the idea, well, what if instead of Cordelia losing her memory, which is what everyone is going to think happens, it's Jazz? Jazz, who has been cursed his entire life with no one being able to remember him. And now, these 4 months where everyone was able to remember him, he's completely lost. He has no recollection of them at all. And then it was a lot of research on, like, well, how do you handle something like that? Can you just tell them like, okay, here's everything, is it like a recap? Here's what you missed on Glee. Or is it like, there's a softer way to enter it? And the research was really like, don't tell them a lot. Tell them literal facts that they need to know, like their name and location and things like that. And then try to get them back on their everyday schedule so that the memories will sort of slowly start to resurface on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Jaspar doesn't have a normal routine. He never
Mm-hmm.
had a normal routine. His life was always chasing some clue, chasing some thought process, chasing some map that he found in a fountain. It was
Mm-hmm.
always go, 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 go. There was no consistency, no routine whatsoever. So there was no routine for him to fall back into to try to remember. The last thing he remembers is that he's supposed to go meet the captain. And that
Mm-hmm.
was, you know, months ago. And now we're in this part of his life where he doesn't remember the one person in the world that he's grown to genuinely care for. And Cordelia is alone in an unfamiliar country where she doesn't know the culture. She doesn't speak the language with some of the people. She has no money, no prospects. The only person she was relying on does not remember her. And because he doesn't remember her, because he doesn't remember the promise he made to the captain, because he doesn't remember finding the letters after the captain died, he does not understand why she's following him around.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he's quite annoyed that he has to be responsible for the life of another person, which
Right.
I think is, it's valid. It was difficult to connect that version of Jaspar with the Jazz that we love, who wants to go fishing and drink and laugh with his friends and play cards and tease Cordelia. But that Jazz is someone who developed because he was able to be remembered and was able to set roots and make
Mm-hmm.
friendships and get to know people. And this Jaspar never had that life. So
Mm-hmm.
he's who he was when they first met. He's someone who has no friendships, who has, one relative friendship with the captain, but it's still a person who's twice his age, who he sees as sort of a surrogate father figure, who he only interacts with a few times a year. And all of their conversations are centered around the island and finding Polaris and where is Polaris and what's the next clue to get us to Polaris. And he essentially is a very standoffish person, because why wouldn't he be?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you be an easy to get to know person if no one is ever going to remember you? It's
Right.
just a sense of self-preservation at that point. And
Mm-hmm.
so Cordelia, I think that she genuinely feels lost. I think she doesn't know how to connect the soft, kind, gentle man that she fell in love with
Mm-hmm.
this abrasive, untrusting person who is very taciturn in comparison to Jazz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what makes part of the such a distinction, is that not only does he not remember, but the last 4 months are downright like unbelievable to him. He's
Mhm.
like, what do you mean? I would not stay in the same place for 4 months. Nobody would remember me, all those, things. So that's like even further the distance that they had to travel. And like I said, I really admire Cordelia in the beginning, because it is, once, you kind of get to a point where, like, obviously if you love someone, that's really harsh, the way he,
Yeah.
exactly as you said, nobody would remember him, so he didn't have to be
Yeah.
kind or anything like that, and for him to like leave her essentially, and then he does come
Mhm.
back kind of when she really really needs it, but that was, I think it was really interesting to meet that Jaspar compared to what
Mhm.
what we got to know in the last book. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that we sort of meet a new version of Cordelia as well, because
Mm-hmm.
we saw Cordelia who chucked oysters with her bare hands because she was too embarrassed to ask for help, and who couldn't tie her own corset or braid her hair
Mm-hmm.
properly or perform the most mundane, easy tasks, because she just, she grew up where everybody always did that stuff for her. And now we see a girl who is literally being tortured, and in the face of someone threatening to break all of her fingers in a way to save the man that she loves, the only thing she says is break them all. Because that's
I
how
loved that.
incredibly
Yeah.
brave and strong she is now. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so full circle. And again, it's kind of heartbreaking, because the Jaspar that would be so proud of her does not know that she's at that point, that she's had that much growth.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I loved that, and how she was also continually there for him,
Mhm.
throughout everything, and it really did a number on him. He was very confused for a long while, like, why why did you stay? What is this? Then he finally puts it together after quite a while, and we get the did you love me?
That scene, honestly, that was a really hard scene. I cried a lot
Yeah.
writing that. And essentially the scene is, the two of them have been together for a couple of months at that point, but because of her research and her conversations with other people, she's learned that she can only reveal small bits and pieces to him, or the mind gets overwhelmed and it spreads that discomfort throughout the body. And we see that because on the first occasion that she tries to tell him about the past, he gets visibly sick and almost loses consciousness because it's just
Mhm.
overwhelming. And so she gives him little pieces of information, like, okay, well, we're friends, we're acquaint. I think she starts off by saying, well, like, we're acquaintances, we know each other.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we're friends, like, we know
Mhm.
each other really well. Okay, you lived in Alaro for 4 months. Okay. Oh, but also while you were there, everybody remembered you. That's months later that he finds that part out. And then
Mhm.
by the time he gets that information, he's starting to put more and more pieces together. And he's like, wait, we weren't just friends? And I think that is also a really vulnerable scene, because she doesn't even realize that she gave him that information. She's
Mhm.
sitting there talking to him, and he's like, I have this memory. I think it's a memory. I had this flashback, and he says, I forget what he says, but it's the memory that he had of being sick. And we
Mm.
saw that in book one, where he was sick and she was sort of caring for him. Then he kissed her palm. And in this particular book, what happens is she is talking to him and explaining that this sort of vision that he had is a memory, it's a flashback.
Mhm.
And during that time, he learns that he kissed her. She said, I forget exactly what she said, but she says something
Mhm.
along the lines of, that was the first time you kissed me. And he's like, why would I kiss you? I thought you said
Right.
we were acquaintances. Then you said we were friends. Now I'm kissing you. Why would I kiss you? And now
Right.
she's backed herself into a corner where she
Mhm.
has to tell him the biggest thing that she's been able to protect this whole time, which is that they were in love.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And even part of the journey for both of them was how both of them react to touch. And,
Mm-hmm.
that was a whole thing where old Jaspar obviously did not like being touched. And so for
Yeah.
her to go back after being so familiar with him, to remember that he doesn't like being touched, but then there's a piece of
Mm-hmm.
him that's like, starts to get disappointed almost of like, oh, hang on, wait, or like, why is my body reacting this way? Or why do I just want that comfort and that touch? And then there's me reading being
Yeah.
like,
And
it's
it's
because he loves her.
and it's hard because, you know, I think that one of the hardest parts is that as the reader, we just want to be like, but you love her, dude. Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
take her word for it. And the conversation that they have is it's quite heartbreaking, because
Mhm.
not only does he find it so incredibly unbelievable that not only would someone remember him, but they would know about his curse and they would still love him and want to be with him
Mhm.
and spend a life with him. But then he has this realization that because he gave his mark to Cordelia,
Mhm.
he can never have that again. That option is gone for him. And he feels bad because it's like, well, I never wanted to be remembered, but now I kind of do. And the option is gone. I don't have that choice anymore.
Right.
And that's when Cordelia says the most selfless thing she could possibly say, which is, if you fall in love with someone else, I will do what I can to help you break this curse, because I think you deserve to be happy. And
Yeah.
I think that's perhaps the first instance when Jaspar realizes, like, I can see why I would have fallen in love with her. I don't remember her, but I could see how easy it would be to fall in love with someone that's this kind and selfless.
Yeah. That is a level of love that I think you did so great at putting in words, and just the whole time, um, where I think even had I been in that situation, I would have probably like pushed it too. Like, dude,
Yeah,
we
it
love
was
each other.
hard.
Like, and
It's
so,
hard. And yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, to be so selfless and to be like, hey, old you loved me. I recognize new you. Well, new
Old
old
you
you.
loved me.
um is this is a different situation, and like, yeah, she's very firm at first that they're not splitting up, because I mean they do have stuff to do, but also just like, if you want to love someone else, like that, to
Yeah.
be in the support of that and not to try to like manipulate that in any way, of just like being not being okay, but being okay with it essentially.
And that's my go-to chapter when chapter 50. Well, I guess chapter 49, chapter 50, and chapter 51. When
Yeah.
I feel imposter syndrome, when I feel doubt in myself as a writer, when I feel I've hit my peak and I'm no longer capable of coming up with great plots and great stories, and I should really just
Yeah.
quit while I'm ahead. Um, I think of that line, which I'll share with everyone since maybe people aren't sure what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You love sailing just before dusk when the sun and the moon share the sky. You love the peace of reading by the moonlight, and you loved me. That's a hard word to say.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
love me. Oh, actually, I think this is past tense. I think we're
Yeah.
past a point where the love could come back. And
Yeah.
that's hard for Cordelia.
Yeah. Well, and to think about it, I mean, granted, again, I would say the vast majority of us are never going to deal with such like memory loss, or
Mhm.
I think just being in a situation in general where you do talk about love in a past tense. You know, a lot of times it's a split and there's not a lot of conversation had again around
Mhm.
the past. So that's a tough one. That's a lot of emotions in this book.
And the kiss is probably, honestly, that's probably one of the best kiss scenes I've ever written in my life.
Yeah.
But it's just so intense, and we're getting that kiss from Jaspar's perspective. So for him, it's
Mhm.
all heat and passion and touch, and he's never had physical intimacy with anyone. So even just this
Yeah.
kiss is completely overwhelming and consuming, and he becomes sort of enraptured, and he goes into this like trance where he just wants, he never
Mhm.
realized how touch starved he was. But if we pull back and we think about that same kiss from Cordelia's perspective, I think we can pinpoint the moment when she realizes that it didn't work. The kiss was supposed to bring back his memories and it didn't work. And he is essentially, I mean, they're essentially strangers at this time. And
Mhm.
the only thing that keeps this intimacy so incredibly high chemistry level is that their minds have been separated, but their bodies, his body remembers being around her.
Mhm.
And that's, it's just, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard.
Absolutely. Yeah. That they're on two separate pages essentially.
Yeah.
And I liked how you set that up as well when they get the information on, kind of true love's kiss, or, eventually he falls in love again and gets the memories back. Or there's the third option in which, like, it doesn't work and nothing changes and they go their separate ways. So obviously you're kind of, again, as the reader, I would say most
Yeah.
people are probably rooting for them, but it's, they
I
had more
think
work ahead of them.
they had so much work ahead of them. And I think that the looming depression and suicide that are brought into this conversation, because we learned that Jaspar had an aunt growing up. His dad had a sister, and
Mhm.
she died like while his mother was pregnant with him. And she essentially committed suicide when she had shared her mark with someone who rejected her, and she just could not cope.
Mhm.
And then we learn later from Higonia that someone who was in the same situation as Cordelia and Jaspar, where they had a soul fate and one soul fate lost memory, the other person never gained their memory back. They eventually
Mhm.
fell in love with someone else, and that person ended their suffering. And
Yeah.
it's difficult, but I wanted to include the fact that this is a fantastical world where people die because of, you know, magic and war and battles and attacks from mythical creatures, but you could also just die from a broken heart, and it has happened. And
Mhm.
I think that's what scares Cordelia the most, and I think that's what makes Cordelia realize she would just let him fall in love,
Mhm. Yeah.
because she can't fathom the idea of living in a world that doesn't include him, and she wants to be near him and be with him. And so she follows him, even though he's kind of like, why are you still here? Like, why are you
Mhm.
still around?
Yeah.
And there's a point where she realizes, like, maybe this is very selfish of me that he told me he doesn't normally have company around him. And I've sort of forced myself into his personal life, into his personal space, and I'm refusing to leave it. But by
Mhm.
that point, he's, grown accustomed to having her around again. So it's just hard. Everything Cordelia goes through in this book is hard. And then Jaspar doesn't even realize why he's so incredibly drawn to this woman. And he's like, well, it must just be because we're soulmates. Like, why else would I care about her? And then he realizes
Mhm.
that there's so much more to their story than just this, they're fated to be together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I know we could easily talk for hours just focusing solely on the two of them,
But
but
so
just to
much
like,
more happens.
I know. Okay, so zooming away from them just for a little breather. We'll come back to them. Don't worry. Um, what's going on in the background? First, I want to mention that we do get more of kind of some of what is going on back in Alaro, and
Mhm.
what's the goings on at the tavern. We also get a little bit more following the three brothers, and then we also get the movements from the Sidons, and them kind of essentially
Mhm.
like following and looking, and I don't know if there's anything within that particularly you want to touch on, but like we have all of their journeys in the background we can discuss as well.
Yeah. Well, in the midst of this love story, we also have Taylor and Gladys, who are,
Yes.
um, they were teens in love, and life came between them, and 30 years passed, and neither one of them ever fell in love with anyone else. But all of the things that kept them apart when they were teenagers, plus 3 decades of resentment, continues to stand between the two of them being able to just let them love each other. And so the attack, the Sidons coming into Alaro and attacking
Yeah.
Gladys, and Taylor just, whoo, he's so badass. Coming in there, kills the Sidon, like throws a tankard and kills one, throws a knife into somebody else's neck, sets one of them on fire, and then just picks Gladys up like she weighs nothing, carries her into the next room. I stitches up her wounds because the Sidon literally had cut her throat.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean it's a gut wrenching scene, and it's just a way for us to keep in touch. This is what's going on in Alaro. Like, okay, Jazz and Cordelia are falling in love a second time around, but that's not the only thing that's happening in the world. We also get our first chapter from Januse's perspective,
Hmm.
and he is terrifying, and being in his mind is also quite terrifying.
Hmm.
um and we meet Ilaria, who becomes a pretty mega player in some of the later books, and I think it's not anticipated that she would be. When you first meet her, she just seems like this really evil, half human, half Sidon with purple dreadlocks, and uh
Yeah.
there's just so much going on in the background that I think it makes it so that this story is not just about Cordelia and Jazz falling in love again. And there's a ton of foreshadowing in this book for More Than Destiny, which will hopefully be out later this year,
Oh.
especially with Iverson and especially with Ilaria and Kevin. And uh, I didn't reread the book I wrote, but I did go through some of my notes. I flipped through some of the scenes I have tabbed. I talked to a few of my beta readers, like, hey, what are your favorite scenes, so I don't forget to talk about them.
Hmm.
And a lot of the foreshadowing for Ilaria and Iverson was pretty heavily like, oh, I loved all that stuff once I read More Than Destiny. So
Hmm.
hopefully someday when people read this, they'll pay attention when they come across those two names.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited to see how that unfolds for sure. And I would love to know, completely random, but I've been wanting to ask this. Where did the inspiration of the mountain whale come from? How did
Isn't
that
that
come to?
so cool? So that,
Yes.
okay, I really like, there is nothing new under the sun, which makes it
Yeah.
very hard to be an author sometimes, because
Yeah,
you want to be unique, you want to stand out, you want your
for
book to
sure.
be, a star above the rest. And so that's why, as an author, I take a lot of risks, because all of the YA books have them going on an adventure and then falling in love. So I'm going to change that.
Mhm.
All of the YA books don't deal with grief, so I'll make that a main character in the first book. A lot of the YA books don't do this, so what can I come up with? So I was researching, I think literally obscure mythical creatures, and I found the rock bolter, which is a real mythical mountain whale in Colorado. That's the only place it exists.
Okay.
And I just was like, I saw pictures of it on the internet and I was like, this thing is rad. This is literally a whale that lives on land and has like tiny clawed talon feet. And it just lives
Yeah.
on a mountain and it slides down the mountain, catching sheep and eating them. And then it climbs back to the top of the mountain. And it's so cool. It was such a cool villain to
Yeah.
include. And then a month after this book came out, we got Tortured Poets Department. And there's a song called Bolter. And I just felt like Taylor was like, oh, I loved your book, Bethany. I named the song after you, which isn't true. But I really liked that happened. It felt very kindred for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
guys are bored, go look up Rock Bolter and tell me what
Yeah.
you think, because the images of it are pretty scary. It's called Slide Rock Bolter, and
Yeah.
it's
That is
it's pretty
exactly.
terrifying, but in the coolest possible way.
Yeah, no, that is exactly what I looked up. And that is like pretty much what I imagine. I mean, it's more gruesome than I imagined because I didn't imagine like a whale with like such sharp, pointy teeth.
Sharp teeth. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, just this like, I could only imagine what you would feel when you were like hiking and looking up a mountain and like, or if you're on like another peak to see a whale just come down a mountain
Yeah.
peak is insane. I love that
And
though.
Cordelia is like, she's in such disbelief because he's like, oh, it's a mountain whale. And she's like, I'm sorry, a what? That's not a
Yeah,
thing. There's no such thing as a whale that
yeah,
lives on a mountain. And he's like, actually, there is. It's right
actually.
here. Let me introduce the two of you.
Yeah,
Um, but it's just, yeah, I just wanted something unique and special. And there's
yeah,
a couple creatures like that in book 3 and in the spinoff too, because
yeah,
I just wanted something different, you know. It's the same with having Sidons instead of having mermaids. I just wanted something different and
yeah,
something that could be as unique as possible. And Sidon is mine. I made up the word, I made up the creatures, I made up what they
yeah.
look like, what they eat, what they sound like when they speak. But the slide rock vulture is somebody else's.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think that's also that might become another one of my favorite, like almost, I don't know if you could call it like a micro trope, but like I love the encounters where one person is like, yeah, obviously, and the other person is like, what do you mean? Like
I
when
mean, that's
something
this whole series is
yeah, that's
one
fair.
person believing something is possible and the other person who literally is like, no, it's not.
That is a really
No,
good
it's not.
point. Because I think that's just so fun to play with of like what is
Yeah.
believable in any world, you know? It just depends what
Yeah.
you've been exposed to.
Well, and also, there's this world in Peru, because now they're on a different continent. There's
Right.
this world in Peru that we don't really know and we haven't got to see very much. So you know, you have to give it its own lore and myth and culture and landscape and creatures, because otherwise it's
Right.
just, what's the difference between this place and Alaro or Myceria or any other place we've ever
Yeah.
visited?
That's a good point. Yeah. Um, so we're inching our way towards the end. And speaking of like
Mm-hmm.
just creatures and different things getting thrown in, then we have, and feel free to correct me again, I've made no notes because I was like, I need to know what happens. Blue people and forgive
Mm-hmm.
my pronunciation, you can correct me, but the Solaris star. Okay, how does all of
Polaris Star,
that
yes.
enter into the mix as we're going along?
There needed to be people from the island that were uh, we need to get to Polaris. It's a
Yeah.
series about a mythical island. Eventually, we're going to have to go to the mythical island. I also knew that in book 3, I needed the two of them to be separated. I wanted Cordelia to, have her own journey outside of Jaspar. And so the two of them, by the end of this book, I knew they needed to be separated. I just was trying to figure out how. And I have this idea for, and I have the deleted scene somewhere. Maybe I should put it on my website. But I actually wrote the original scene was them at the hotel and Sidons attacked and they ran and hid and they ran up the mountain and hid on the mountain. And that's when we have the scene with the Slide Rock Bolter. And I added way more in between. You know, what actually ends up happening is the hotel gets flooded and they flee. They go to the lighthouse. There's an incident at the lighthouse. Then they follow a map that takes them to the mountain. So I added like 8 chapters in between those 2 instances. And during that time, I thought like, well, we've already had several encounters with the Sidons. We know that they're coming back.
Mhm.
Is there any other obstacle that they could go through? And that's where I got the idea for the flood. And I was rewriting that chapter with the flood. And I was like, I really don't want Sidons here. I have Sidons everywhere. Like, is there another creature I could put here instead of Sidons in the water? Is there someone else? And that's when I thought of, well, you know, there's all this water going on. Maybe there's more Danthums here. And at that point, I realized like, if we're going to get to the island, maybe we should connect with people from the island before we get there. And we don't even
Mm.
necessarily know that that's the case. It's pretty heavily implied and we can put pieces together. But, you know, then these people show up and they call Cordelia a princess and they call Jaspar a knight and
Yes.
they have cerulean skin and they wear bronze armor. And I just thought, what if that's how they get separated? What if these guys show up and they have blue skin and they call her a princess and they talk about taking her home? And we know where it's all leading to, but Jaspar doesn't. And
Mhm.
he's genuinely terrified and he's ready to rip these people apart. And they're so polite. They're like, no, it's okay. We're just here to help. And he's ready to just absolutely destroy them to get Cordelia back.
Mhm.
But before any of that can happen, we finally encounter Janus.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that was kind of fun to write. The snake thing was really scary. But I knew that since they had the world serpent as their
Mhm.
pendant and on their
Mm.
flag, it needed to be a presence in their vicinity somehow, because why else
Mhm.
would it be their symbol? And so that's why the world serpent is who attacks Cordelia and drags
Oh.
her to uh to Janus, who's just waiting and ready.
Yeah, gotcha. And that's
Yeah.
that's also just like another I guess funny moment as a reader when, you know, we're reading at whatever pace we are and you can kind of put together little clues and stuff. And at the
Mhm.
same time, if you are in Jaspar's position, like when you're going through these kinds of things, you don't really have time to like properly vet people to like,
Yeah.
let's have a conversation first. I'll
Yeah.
hear
Can
you
I see
out.
your
Like,
resume? Let me run a background check real quick.
right. Do you have referrals I can call to see like who you are? Um, Absolutely. So a lot is going real fast. I can't obviously I did not I Jenna, I'm just gonna keep saying how I wrote nothing because I was like, I want to keep reading. Completely forgot about the princess thing. Um, but as we're getting towards the end, as I always like to ask, like, what were your intentions around having everything end where it was? Because as far as I remember, if I remember correctly, uh, is it Ivor and Hagonia that are stuck?
Iverson, Hagonia, and
Yeah.
Jaspar have all been captured and they are in
Stressful.
Janus's dungeon, and Cordelia has been taken by these blue men in bronze armor.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, so how did we end up there? Like why I know and we'll kind of get into like, okay, setting it up for book 3 obviously, but
Obviously, yeah.
just going over the ending and your thoughts around that.
So a lot of that was I love Iverson, first of
Yeah.
all. I love Iverson, which I think is pretty obvious considering I'm always trying to find a way to keep him in the story. But I wrote this scene with Iverson like back at the hotel, mostly because I was trying to it wasn't even going to be in the book. It was just an exercise I was doing because I was trying to figure out like, okay, the brothers just got back to Alaro. So
Mhm.
what's going on in Alaro? What can we catch up with? And then I wrote the scene where Iverson was just like completely exhausted. And I thought, well, what's Iverson doing? Iverson is such a social butterfly that he would be exhausted by this point. And his intuition has been putting his anxiety through the mill between the attack and what happened to Kleegbeil and the ship that they decided not to get on because he just had so much
Yep.
anxiety when he got near the ship that he couldn't bring himself to let him or his brothers get on board. And so by the time they get back to the hotel, I was like, okay, I think Iverson would just go to the room, close the door, and just enjoy a good minute of silence and solitude. But that's not a fun chapter to read. So he
No,
had to have something else happen. So while he's there, he finds a book, and in the book is more information about Quillaris. And it turns out the book is one of the captain's journals. So this is a foreshadowing moment from book 1. Jaspar ran around his room. He cleaned up every piece of evidence that he lived there. He shoved the dresser into the corner, and he never realized that when he did that, he knocked over one of the captain's journals and it went on the floor.
Yeah.
And that is the journal that Iverson finds. And that is the journal that the Janus is looking for, because it has the map, the other half of the map that leads to Quillaris.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how Iverson gets captured. Then, of course, we have Higonia is captured. Kleegbeil is captured because we also need our talisman maker. Higonia is captured because Janus needs her to get to her sister so he can break the curse. And Jaspar is his only link to Cordelia and Quillaris. And as it turns out, Jaspar has the cloaking spell in his head. He just doesn't realize it. It was given to him in a dream. And the scene where Higonia coaxes it out of him, and then as it turns out, it's not Higonia, it's Janus disguised as Higonia. That's where the book ends. And so I this is my thing, is I write really good cliffhangers. And I feel like this one is almost worse. Like book 1, we have the ship was sinking and they were sinking with it. But to a certain extent, I think we know at least one person is going to survive that shipwreck, or it's going to be a terrible trilogy. But you get to the end of this and it's like, okay, Cordelia's missing. Gladys almost had her throat slit open. The brothers just got back from a trip, but now Iverson has been attacked. And then on top of all of that, Janus has, as his captives in his prison, Kleegbeil, Higonia, Iverson, and Jaspar. And that's where the book ends, is we've got all these loose ends.
Yeah.
And no path forward. So I feel like this cliffhanger is just as bad as book 1, even if it doesn't end on the same. Well, it ends on a pretty good line, I like to think, but yeah,
it's interesting because I think the first book had a very like situational pressure, like just the situation they were currently in at that moment, which added to the intensity. And this one, it's like I always feel like I like the metaphor of basically comparing like authors to like setting the chessboard, essentially. Like I like watching, getting all the pieces, and then it starts to happen. And I'm like, oh, the pieces have been set, you know? And,
everything is coming together.
Yeah. Janus was working very hard collecting a lot of important people.
For centuries, that boy has been trying to break his curse.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. Is there, before we just touch on kind of like book 3 and beyond, is there anything else in book 2 that you would love to touch on? I know we like covered a fraction of literally what happens, but yeah.
I don't know. Do you have a favorite scene? Or maybe a favorite plot twist that I really caught you off guard with?
I think, well, okay, besides the mountain whale winning my heart in a giant weird way, I think on top of the did you love me scene was later when he basically admits that even though like he doesn't have all of his memories back, but to still admit that he loves her regardless, and like kind of acknowledging that. Like for me, that was the moment where some of that pressure like released, and I was like, yes, thank you for realizing. Welcome. So I thought that was very sweet, because like we've been talking too, of like how hard it was for Cordelia to deal with the whole situation,
Yeah.
and to accept it so graciously, and to continually help him and be by his side, whether he liked that or not. But to help him in the long run, I thought that was the moment where I was like, okay, it was like I could breathe finally. Not everything else was going on that makes it tough to breathe, but yeah, I
Yes.
liked that.
Yes. I think also, uh, I guess what I hope readers take away from book two, not just that nobody's safe, because they're not.
Yeah.
What I hope readers take away from book two is just that, we start the story with Jazz and Delia and the little town of Alaro, but there's so much more to this world.
Mhm.
And we see a little bit of that here in book two. We go all over Karoo. We see new languages, new cultures, new creatures, new interactions and dynamics, and we meet two people. And this is not a spoiler because my publisher already told the world about it, but we briefly meet a man named Russell who has fallen in love with Princess Marie of Myceria. And the two
Yes.
of them are the stars of More Than Dreams, which is the
Mhm.
spinoff. So hopefully what people take away is that there are no small characters, and
Yeah.
even the tiniest character that you think doesn't matter might come back in a really big way, because that's one of the things I pride myself on: two things: cliffhangers and my ability to foreshadow, which
Yeah.
if you read book two right after reading book one, you'll be flabbergasted at all the stuff I managed to push into it.
Amazing. And we didn't even talk about that. Was their
Nope,
whole like
because they get like a half a paragraph and that's it. But
but
yeah.
uh, but it's so good too. Like immediately once you said that, I was like, oh yeah, like I can recall the scene, the movie in my head of it, when
Mhm.
Jess Bartu was like getting a little jealous, and he was like, well, you were over there laughing and like having a good time. I was actually getting information. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
And that's a fight. There's a little bit of humor in that scene too, because he's like, "What
yeah,
princess?" And she's like, "How many princesses are there? What are you talking about?"
right.
So there's a little bit of humor in that scene too, but that's also where we get a line that was inspired by a TV show called Friends.
Oh.
My favorite couple from Friends is Chandler and Monica. Duh, that should be everybody's favorite couple. And there's a scene where he says, "You are the most beautiful woman in the room." And essentially, Jaspar says something similar to her, but she's wearing the talisman. So people can't really see what she looks like. She's very
Right.
vague and sort of, uh, wallflower-y. And she says, "But nobody can see what I look like." And he says, "Well, I can." And that's just, it's another moment where Jaspar is falling more in love with her, and Cordelia is like, "You have got to stop talking to me like this when I'm trying so hard not to fall in love with you too."
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's hard.
Not
That was a
not
rough chapter too.
yeah. Oh, that's fair. That's fair. All that to say, I mean, if you've listened this much of the episode, I would have hoped you have read the book. If not, go read it
Go
immediately,
read
because
it, please,
there's
please.
so much happens in there. Um,
Do
awesome.
you have
Okay. Oh
any
yeah.
predictions for book three?
Oh. Okay, so if I'm thinking of like the pacing of how things are going, well, okay, so they called Cordelia Princess. So I would
Mm-hmm.
love to know more about that, how that's going. Um, Not really. I'm so hats off to you, because I like to think as a reader, I'm pretty good at like, I know where this story is going. Um, no. I'm the second book, I think, broke me a little bit, and I'm just like, okay, I don't even know what's gonna happen next.
Yeah, it's like, I need a
I'm
cup of hot chocolate and a hug, and I need to cope a little bit before I dump into number
yeah,
three.
yeah. No, I would guess we do get to Colaris, and I'm
Mhm.
excited to see that, and to see more of like clearly we do not have a lot of information on what's going on.
Right.
So I'd be curious. He was kind of remembering slowly. Yeah, I'm just gonna go with the flow. I'm just gonna hop right into it so I can see what happens.
Well, then
Yeah,
you can have me back for book 3, which I also have not gotten to talk about. So
absolutely, I will, and I will have. Well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I was gonna say I will make myself take better notes, and then I was like, girl,
you
just
know,
part of the fun of it.
I do the same thing because I have a podcast where we talk about books chapter by chapter, and
Yeah,
there are books that I've read dozens of times, and I'll still sit there and be like, "Oh man, I haven't taken a note in 5 pages. What happened
yeah,
again?"
yeah.
And we go chapter by chapter, so I sort of feel obligated to really pay attention to the details. But
Right.
there's just so much happening, and when I write books, I try to make sure that every chapter ends on its own variation of a cliffhanger, because I know how easy it is to get bored. And that's also why
Yeah.
my chapters are so short, because, maybe
Right.
you only have time for one chapter, but then when you get through those 4 pages, you see how that chapter ended, and hopefully you keep going.
Yes, no, you are good at that, because I would find myself like being like, okay, I'll finish this chapter, and then I'm like, but wait.
But wait, there's more.
What what is Cordelia's mom's name?
Begonia.
Begonia. Okay, I knew it was
Begonia and
similar.
Begonia. Yeah.
Okay, and we don't know where she's at.
Nope.
She is obviously queen of Colaris, and she's just been hiding out on this island no one can find. I think maybe that would be my one prediction. Um, as you're talking, my brain stopped panicking and was like, "You've got this. Put some pieces together."
Put some pieces together.
Could be totally wrong, but that's the one thing where I'm like, okay, this would make sense, I think. Or it doesn't, and that's fine too. And I'm excited. As always, this has been a blast, and I know like we've covered a small portion of what the whole book entails. I will absolutely have you back on as soon as I will message you when I get through book 3.
Yay!
And we can continue this journey and even onward. I've loved following your journey so far. So again, thank you for doing what you do and sharing it with the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as a final thought, can you let everyone know where they can find you if they'd like to reach out or anything like that?
So I am everywhere at Bethany Finger Author, and you can find me on Instagram, on my website. I've got a Discord for my podcast. If you want to join, you can. And message me. I love talking to readers. Feel free,
Yeah.
DM me. Even if it's I hate you for the cliffhanger, that's fine.
I'll take
And pay attention to the details on my Instagram, because if you think I foreshadow in my books, you should look at some of my posts. I just love
No.
clues on Easter eggs and leaving them everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, now what I'm doing, I know what I'm doing for the next half an hour before I turn everything off before bedtime. Like, you're just going to get a message of me. I'm going to send you one of your posts being like, so what does this mean? What are you talking about, Bethany? What's going on?
I think in one of my captions, I even put that. I was like, if you're reading this and you're wondering, why would the author post this random phrase? Maybe you should read this book.
Oh my gosh, you're killing me in the best way.
I'll need to make sure I have you on my list for the arc of More Than Dreams. I know my
Oh,
publisher needs a
yes.
list, so I'll make sure I put you on there.
Please. Yeah, that
So
would
I
be
can put
absolutely
you through
fantastic.
more turmoil.
Great. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I am so excited already. Looking forward to the
Thank
next
you.
one.
I'm so honored that you read both books and that you had me back on. And I really hope you continue with the series and that you get to see how it all plays out.
For sure. I will. I will. For better or for worse.
Always.
If you've made it to this point in the episode, thank you so much for watching. I'd be incredibly grateful if you showed some support either by following or subscribing, depending on what platform you're watching on, and leaving a comment. You can always follow me on Instagram at Busy Reading Romantasy, or on TikTok at busy.reading.romantasy to see what I'm up to. You can also email me at busyreadingromantasy@gmail.com to tell me your thoughts, dreams, secrets, or if you just have any book and author suggestions you'd love me to cover. Grab yourself a good book, get cozy. I'll see you next Wednesday for a new episode.